In the previous trilogy, you were always talking to Jack's face. Now that you can play as Jack, well, guess what? You're looking at Jack's butt all the time. And the problem we had with Jack's butt is that it really looked like a toilet seat. Like, it really looked like a toilet seat. Hey everybody, Rod Fergusson, studio head of the Coalition, and of course we make Gears 5. You don't know Jack, so why don't you join me for the next few minutes and let's talk about him. We did Gears 4 because we wanted to show that the Coalition could make a legitimate Gears of War game, but there was a feeling that maybe we were too safe, that we stayed too close to the formula. So the commander's intent, if you will, the vision for Gears 5 was challenge expectations. And that's where you see the open world side that we did. And then when you look at RPG elements was something we wanted to add. And that's where our good friend Jack comes in. So Jack's been around since 2006 with Gears 1. You know, we had big aspirations for Jack in the first game to do a lot more than he ended up doing, that we were going to take control of him and actually become Jack and all those sorts of things. But we essentially had 18 months to ship and things end up on the floor. So what Jack ultimately becomes is a lock and key system. In the opening cutscene, you get to see Jack use the kind of his trademark ability. So let's take a quick look at that. So there's Jack. Yay, Jack. He's got these sort of teardrop eyes because he's supposed to be more expressive, and that allows you to sort of angle them and give you kind of an eyebrowy feel. We wanted him to be even more present in the Ultimate Edition. In the actual first version, Gears 1, he kind of just is there and goes away, and we felt like it was kind of underserving Jack. So when we remastered it, we actually show him there full in, and then we put a bunch of expression on him that you'll see that when the helicopter goes over, he'll actually look up, be afraid, and cloak. And that was kind of Jack's trick, right? Like, we didn't want him in front of the camera, and we didn't want him in the way of shooting, and it was just, it was taking up rendering polygons. So basically we cloaked him, which meant he went away completely. Like, that was one of the differences between also Gears 1 and Gears 5. In Gears 1, when Jack cloaks, he's gone. Like, he just doesn't exist. In Gears 5, when he cloaks, he's actually still there, and he has sort of his predator shimmer, and you can actually find him if you want to. Again, the commander's intent for 5 was challenge expectations, and one of the ways we wanted to really do that was to bring RPG elements in. We wanted to have special abilities that you could level up as you played through the game, and initially we put them on the character. Kait could go and she would, essentially what looked like magic, right? She would like put a cloak on, or she would summon, lightning to stun enemies. And it felt kind of weird, honestly. Like, that was one of the things we didn't really like, is that idea that as you're progressing, the character is changing so much and getting special abilities that didn't feel grounded. When we thought about Kait having this sort of magic lightning out of her hand and, force powers, it just didn't sit with us very well. And we thought, hey, why don't we put all these abilities in Jack? And that way we have this robot that has abilities and we can level them up and level up Jack as we go. And so that Kait goes through her transformation narratively, but she doesn't actually become a different person, because if we think to the future and we want to do another game, now we have to think about what does she become from the previous game, and now does she have even bigger superpowers and all this stuff. Whereas if it's all contained within Jack, then it's all kind of self-contained. And I think when we looked at Jack as support, we kind of had two inspirations. One was like, Mario Galaxy. The other one was Elizabeth from BioShock Infinite that I worked on. And that idea that having the support character that could be present and helpful, but didn't feel like it was taking away power or control of the game, it's super important. I thought Elizabeth was a great example of that. And so in some ways, Jack became our Elizabeth. But along the way, we decided, this is really cool. What if we make Jack a playable character? What if we were to go from 2-player co-op, which is what Gears 4 was, to 3-player co-op? So as a creator, you're trying to take down barriers. And the biggest barrier for anybody getting into a game basically is the $60. And so now Game Pass opens our world up. Where we started with Jack then was to say, like, let's not just focus on Jack being playable, let's make Jack playable much like Mario Galaxy, where it's like, oh, I'm going to help, but maybe I don't really know how to play that much. It was really just focused on how do you bring a new player along. Back in April 2017, we did an inclusive design sprint at the studio. It was part of Gaming for Everyone that was at Microsoft. And we brought in 4 subject matter experts, and they told us their stories about what it's like to game with disabilities. And it really resonated within our studio. Like, it was transformative. When you think about it, there's this inclusive design idea, which is you solve for one and expand to many. And I think the best example of that is subtitles. Subtitles were invented for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. I'm willing to bet that you look at subtitles at the airport, on the TV, and you read subtitles at the gym when on the treadmill. So that's not designed for you, but you use it. And that was kind of the way we sort of took that into as we thought about accessibility within Gears. So we did a lot around making our subtitle better, being able to control with one stick, getting rid of camera shake, getting rid of vibration if as options. But we really leaned into Jack to also play that role. Jack is another entry point for people to have that challenge. But as we were doing it and playing Jack, Jack got really fun. And we felt like we were really close to something super special around not just having an easy way to play for either a new player or a person who had a disability. And so what we decided to do is not only, now that we'd started with approachability for new players and accessibility for disabled players, we were like, let's just focus on even the hardcore and just make it really fun. We just kept iterating and iterating and iterating and not losing the first two principles, but really focusing on how do we make this fun. And now, like, Jack is hugely successful. And then a lot of people want to play as Jack just because it's fun, not because they're new or what have you. So we're really excited about where that journey took us to. So this is the line drawing for Jack 4.0 at this point for Gears 5. And he had some interesting design challenges because one of the things we wanted to do was to make sure Jack looked like Jack. And so what you see is the teardrop eyes here are a big part of what makes Jack Jack. And it also allowed us to do some expressive things. And that's one of the things, you know, we really wanted to do is not have a toaster flying beside you. We wanted to have a companion. We wanted to have a squad mate. And initially it got a little pet-like. It got a little bit like, here boy, come here Jack, come on, go open the door Jack. And it felt kind of demeaning and we wanted you to care about Jack. So we really tried to play him up as an actual companion, an actual squad mate. I mean, the values of Gears of War is found family, but we wanted to make it a little bit more like he was part of the squad and not the family dog. Propulsion was interesting. As you see with Gears 4 and Gears 5, we were sort of taking it more believable. And we wanted things to be like, if you kind of squint at it, I kind of think it could be real. So we went in with this sort of single engine that allowed you to have this propulsion for Jack. The thing we weren't prepared for, like when you normally interface with Jack in the previous trilogy, you were face on. You were always talking to Jack's face. Well, now that you can play as Jack, well, guess what? You're looking at Jack's butt all the time. And the problem we had with Jack's butt is that it really looked like a toilet seat. Like it really looked like a toilet seat. And so that was one of the problems, that we had this notion of like, we can't have this flying toilet seat going around. And just based on the shape that was here, like it was like, oh, it's a toilet seat. Like it was, and so we had to do a lot of work to try to get that kind of hidden. This was important because we wanted to be able to see the engine and see it pivot and show off the cool visual effects and give you a sense of where it was going and it was responding to your controls. But again, it had a little, you know, problem with the fact that it looked like a toilet. Again, being grounded and believable, we wanted to not just have Jack pick up sort of science abilities and just work. We wanted it to be visible on the character and see the character change over time as you're upgrading. So as you upgrade his shock ability, maybe it would show up there, and we like everything, like basically there's 5 or 6 different upgrades that you could put on Jack that would show up visibly in it. And that really came to life too in the basically menu. When you go in to change the abilities, you would see Jack change over time as you're playing. So it felt like you were actually progressing. We didn't change him so much that he became a completely different character, because again, we wanted you to care about Jack and we didn't want you to see him as a flying toaster, and we wanted not to lose his face and lose his emotion. So we didn't want to change him too much. We didn't want to transformer him, but we wanted you to feel like, oh, he's getting stronger and more powerful, and these attachments were the way we did it. Once we made the decision that all the abilities were going to live in Jack, it was about finding out what abilities work best. And we had a bunch of different ideas, but we also had to think about how Jack worked from an AI perspective. What I loved about Elizabeth in Infinite is that she felt very smart. She was helpful, she would throw coins and ammo to you, and you never felt like, oh, you're so dumb, like you never had that moment. What we ended up doing is actually, you see here, is basically Jack is going to go and make a smart decision that says, I'm not only going to shock that one enemy, I'm going to put down a shock circle that'll encase as many as possible. Cloak is a cool one. We thought was going to be really useful to change up the play style because, you know, again, from the original trilogy, Jack cloaked. There's even a Penny Arcade cartoon around like, how come you have this technology that can make an invisible robot and I'm standing here getting shot all the time? I had it on my wall up at Epic. The idea of allowing the player to go invisible seemed like a kind of a no-brainer, and introduced stealth, which was actually quite challenging for us. But that idea of player-initiated combat and letting the player decide how to engage was really important to us, and so stealth kind of fit into that. You know, Gears is known for kick open door, bullets start coming even before you do anything, get into cover and kill them all. And as part of our challenge expectations, we're like, well, now that the player has more tools, they can go invisible, they can fetch things. There were so many more choices. We wanted to allow the player to take a second, take a breath, and think about what they want to do. Because this is the deepest gameplay that a Gears game has ever had. And so we wanted the player to have the chance to think about it. A number of battles, you'll go into the space and you'll actually get to see the swarm kind of just mingling about because they don't know that you're there yet. And that was a big change for us. And part of that stealth, the ability to cloak and go all the way upstairs and take out the sniper first, was part of that as well. Let's look at a couple of the abilities we ended up not using. This idea of dropping cover, we wanted to create this sort of idea of a temporary force field, if you will. And we actually even played with the idea that it was movable, that you could actually lean into it and start pushing it around, as you can see here. It just got really complicated. And we used it a little bit on the ice. And so, you know, we took that prototype and we leveraged it in the level a few places where you could push ice on ice kind of things. It just made the level design so challenging to know that Jack could put cover anywhere, that anytime you were trying to make a challenge for the player, Jack could sort of override it immediately by just allowing you to drop cover. So it was just too game-changing for us, and that's why we got rid of it. We also went with like this idea that, you know, Jack could be a fabricator, if you know the sort of 3D printer in our world. We tried prototypes of Jack having the ability of dropping turrets you could get onto. We had Jack drop decoys to attract enemies to it. But again, instead of being sort of the support where you felt like it was helping you shoot and it was kind of helping you in the moment-to-moment gameplay, it felt sort of a fundamental difference. And it also made it sort of challenging around when it gets to be player controlled, how are you cycling through all these things to build, and how do you tell Jack, I want a turret or I want a decoy, and those sorts of things. And actually, this is one of the ones that went away just kind of due to complexity too. Not only was it sort of too game changing, but it was also just complex. Example here is this idea of like, oh, I'm going to call in reinforcements. So I'm going to use Jack to to call in a guardian to help me, and getting AI bots to help you. We kind of got around that with hijack, and so we liked the idea of, oh, I want to take over an enemy, as opposed to calling in reinforcements. And it made the play interesting for Jack, as I talked about Jack wanting to be useful for people who actually were high-end players. They could actually, if they wanted to shoot a gun and be pixel precise, they could hijack an enemy, hijack a boss, and become that boss, and then devastate the way that you would as a normal player, if you didn't want to do just support. And so here's an example of calling in a bot that you actually become that bot when you call it in. So now you become the guardian, shield is up, and you can fly around and sort of destroy everyone. And this idea of that possessing a helper, or possessing the enemy in a way, was really what sort of started off hijack as an ability. I mean, one, it's a killer pun. I mean, come on, hijack? Like, this is, like people wanted to change the name several times. I would not allow it to happen. It had to be hijack. It was just a cool ability to change the way you play. We wanted him to be a squad mate. And so we were like, well, what can we do around personality? And we played with a bunch of stuff, actually, from full vocalization to no vocalization. If you think about WALL-E on one side, which the full kind of WALL-E, you know, like and being able to speak, and then you look at R2-D2, which doesn't have any sort of expressive ability other than that kind of the squeals and the beeps and the boops. It was kind of this in the middle. We kind of wanted the facial emotiveness of WALL-E, but we kind of wanted the language of R2-D2. And so we tried to create this sort of like hybrid character in that way, because we wanted to endear him to you, because the things that the journey, the transformation Jack's going to go through, we wanted to be important to you, that you would care about Jack and not just look at him as a piece of metal. We do this little scene here where Baird introduces him to the squad. And there's a couple things to note. We wanted Kait because, as she says at the start of Act 2, I don't like bots because I've been running from them my entire life. So she's not a big fan of this whole tech thing. So you go over and then, you know, Baird is describing Jack and his abilities, and we use this moment to let sort of Jack kind of like, you know, be happy and show off his face and kind of be expressive, and you realize, oh, there's something more here. It's not just a toaster, right? As they're going through it, you even hear Baird go like, this is what I do. And ultimately you guys destroy it. And so then you see the, oh no, what? I'm gonna get blown up. Like, and so again, showing off some of the expression. So there's this kind of these cool moments where this is sort of the grounding of, oh, there's more to this than just a flying toaster. Now we're getting towards the end, so spoiler alert, if you haven't finished Gears 5, stop now, otherwise you're going to ruin the ending for yourself. So we've been building up Jack now all the way through. We introduced him as a character, we made him part of the squad. You've been investing all the way through. Basically, every bit of progression you're doing in the game essentially is going into Jack. Like, we felt like you've been investing into Jack, and we wanted there to be a cost to war. And like, as a developer, we kind of wanted to hit the reset button too, because otherwise, like, you're gonna expect Jack to start the next thing with all of these abilities you've upgraded and everything, and this allows us to kind of get rid of that. And so if we were to bring Jack forward, then you could have a fresh Jack and start all over again, right? So it's one of those things where it's kind of like good for the story and good for the design. Basically, what we wanted to is we were saying, how do we get to this point where we can have Jack make his own decision? And this was gonna be a big moment, is basically you're fighting this giant monster, you're going to use these rail guns, and you're gonna learn pretty quickly, like, we can kind of piss it off, we can hurt it, but we're not gonna win. And so this entire game, you've been giving Jack orders. Go do that, go do this, open that door, give me that ammo, cover me in cloak, or give me some health. So we wanted this moment where Jack makes a decision, and Jack shuts down Baird, and he decides, nope, I'm gonna save the day. I have the beacon coordinates, I can do this, Jack heroically sacrifices himself to save the squad and the city and humanity. And so you have this really interesting moment of this character that you've been investing in throughout the entire game and grown attached to, and he does a heroic sacrifice to save everybody else. And the number of people who have told us and reacted to the fact that this piece of metal with teardrop-shaped eyes caused them to get teary-eyed and emotional and upset and yell at us and swear at us because we killed someone they truly liked and enjoyed having in their squad, meant a lot to us, and felt like we accomplished our goals with that. So, I mean, when you look at the journey now, Gears came out in 2006, so it's been 13 and a half years. Like, we go from this lock and key robot that didn't really mean that much to the squad, other than Baird, and now we've taken him 13 years later to this place where he's a meaningful character to the players who played either as him or with him. And it was really interesting to have that journey to go from this simple device to now this sort of almost fully fleshed out character that had abilities and meaning in gameplay and its own story arc and own journey. And so when he looks at you in the scene with his sad eyes, knowing he's going to have to make this choice that Jack is choosing to destroy himself in order to save everybody else. And so it was kind of a pivotal moment, and it helped us feel like a great sort of arc of where Jack had started from to where now Jack is ending, and it meant a lot to us. He's a meaningful character, and everybody knows Jack. When you think about the squad and Marcus, Dom, and Anya, and Cole, and Baird, like, Jack's part of that. And this felt like a really big cherry on top of this sundae to sort of honor Jack as a character in our game. When I think about when people come to Gears, they come for the story. We're given permission, because of the world we've built, to have this comic book sort of sensibilities. We can laugh at ourselves, we can make really bad jokes and sort of have dark humor. We can have this sort of blockbuster action movie sequences and over-the-top set pieces, and it's like a summer blockbuster. And then we can have these sort of sweet moments of sadness where, whether it's the Maria scene or the Dom scene or the choice or Jack. The fact that we can go from this sort of big men with thick necks and all that stuff, and we're able to go now to where we're at a place and play with that and make our storytelling more contemporary and deal with grays instead of black and whites, where we can have more complex characters and more nuanced characters, and yet we can still bring out the emotion. And the fact that people are responding that way to the story is just so meaningful to all of us. And we couldn't have done it without obviously the technical talents to be able to show this stuff on screen, but the voices, the cast that we have is amazing, and Tom Bissell's writing is amazing, and it's just been an amazing collaboration to be able to tell this story and do it the way we did.